Welcome everyone to today's first virtual committee meeting. We have a change in the agenda. We are going to move the second item to the first item. That's the Equality Index, and then go over the strategic plan second. So presenting the Equality Index information is Megan Anderson. Thank you, Megan.
Hello there, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, and I just wanted to confirm one thing, Megan. We didn't have anybody sign up to speak.
We did not.
Okay.
We
All right.
closed at 9:30 this morning and we had no one sign up.
Okay, thank you. All right, Megan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, as mentioned, I'm Megan Anderson. I head up sustainability for the City of Raleigh, and I'm also on the Equity Leadership Team and the North Carolina Government Alliance on Race and Equity cohort for Raleigh. I'm very happy to be here today, especially during Pride Month, to share information with you about LGBTQ supportive programs. Dr. Audrey Caesar, the new head of the Office of Equity and Inclusion and the Executive Director of the Human Relations Commission, couldn't be with us today. However, I do have representatives from the HRC and the new Equity Office, Sustainability, and the City Attorney's Office if Council has more specific questions. Sustainability has been collaborating with the HRC on the MEI Index for several years. We collaborate with several departments to evaluate the index. The departments include the City Manager's Office with Marcelle's leadership, the City Attorney's Office, Human Resources, Police, Parks, Recreation and Cultural Resources, Housing and Neighborhoods, and Sustainability, Human Relations, and new collaborating for this presentation is the new Office of Equity and Inclusion. The Municipal Quality Index, you'll hear me refer to as MEI, is a rating system for cities based on municipal policies, programs, and services that support the lived experience of equality for LGBTQ persons. The rating system reviews non-discrimination laws, the city as an employer, city services, law enforcement, and leadership on LGBTQ equality, and accounts for policies, programs, and services to support equality in sexual orientation and gender identity. In 2019, MEI is the 8th annual edition and rates a total of 506 cities on 49 different criteria from every state in the nation. Cities are scored out of 100 possible points across 5 categories. In addition, there are a number of items rated on the MEI Index in which Raleigh and all NC cities are preempted by state law, which we'll talk more about, and there are areas where bonus points are available. Every few years, the MEI Index is adjusted, new measures are added, and some are removed. This is to ensure that cities are always striving for continuous improvement. As you'll hear, Raleigh's score fluctuates as we aren't measured on the same things every year. Raleigh's MEI scorecard totals for the past few years are as follows. 2017, we had 60 points. 2018, we dropped to 52 points. Many new measures were added, and some items Raleigh had been receiving points for were removed from the index, and some items that had been bonus points were moved to full point sections. Again, they do this so cities across the country keep moving forward and continually push best practices. For 2019, we went back up to 58 points, and we'll talk more about these scores today and opportunities to keep improving. For Raleigh's 2019 scorecard, on this slide you'll see the areas where the city received full points. For other areas, we may have received partial or no credit. In some areas, such as non-discrimination ordinances, we are preempted by North Carolina state law, and therefore no cities in North Carolina were able to score points for those sections. I will walk through all the areas of the 2019 MEI Index and highlight opportunities where we could improve. We expect to increase our score in several areas next year. Thanks to the leadership of City Council and City staff leadership, we have several new and existing pathways that will help us explore enhanced support for LGBTQ issues. I'll summarize the biggest areas of opportunity and growth for the city to increase our LGBTQ support, and I'll share more about some of these in the presentation. These include staff building a partnership with Wake County to enhance direct service provisions for the LGBTQ community. The county traditionally leads health and human services programs and the city funds several LGBTQ programs and organizations. This continued partnership will help us build an enhanced program and opportunities. In addition, with the new Office of Equity and Inclusion, as well as the continued work of the Human Relations Commission and the several new and existing boards and commissions that the HRC oversees, staff are exploring options for enhanced LGBTQ support and representation. This will create more direct communication with the community and city staff around topics affecting our LGBTQ community. And now to the first section of the MEI Index. Someone help me forward my slide. Thank you. All right. This category examined discrimination laws that focus specifically on private employment, housing, and public accommodations. The state of North Carolina, Wake County, and Raleigh received 0 points due to state law which mandates that municipalities may only engage in activity that is sanctioned by the state. As you know, cities in North Carolina only have authority given by the General Assembly. So for future opportunities, new rulings at the Supreme Court could have an effect on the future MEI Index and LGBTQ protections. Just last week, on June 15, 2020, Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia, this Supreme Court decision offered further employment protection for LGBTQ people. The City Attorney's Office also noted that North Carolina cities do not have the legal authority to enact broad LGBTQ inclusive regulations that would govern the private sector. In fact, the MEI Index report specifically acknowledges that because of restrictive state laws, cities with a dedication to equality in Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina will never be able to score as well as cities with comparable dedication to equality that exist in states without the restrictive laws. If Council has further questions about this, I'll ask Dottie Kibler, who's with us today from the City Attorney's Office, to share further information at the end of the presentation. City of Raleigh non-discrimination policies, although we are restricted by state law, the city's non-discrimination policy received full points for the MEI Index. I'll share a bit more about that in the next slide as well. For the Fair Housing Ordinance, this is currently being evaluated through the Office of Human Relations, who oversees the Fair Housing Board. As it stands, Raleigh Fair Housing Ordinance does not include language prohibiting sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Again, Raleigh does not have the authority to include this language since all powers are derived from the state. However, the city is in the process of updating the Fair Housing Ordinance, so it will be substantially equivalent to the Federal Fair Housing Act. They are looking to obtain the equivalent language that HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, uses, with the intent to include more inclusive language for groups such as the LGBTQ community. In addition, steps are being taken to establish a fair housing office to investigate housing complaints and administer fair housing testing. For municipality as an employer section, the city received full points for transgender inclusive healthcare benefits. These benefits are spelled out in HR's benefits handbook that is provided to all employees. The city also has an inclusive ordinance for the city contractor non-discrimination. And as mentioned on the last slide, for non-discrimination in city employment, the city's policy opposes discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. This policy already receives points on the MEI Index. However, HR is actually currently working with staff to update this policy, and it will be evaluated for further opportunities to include LGBTQ inclusive language. Inclusive workplace. We have opportunities to expand our reach here. For training, as of last week, the city manager announced that we will be requiring equity training for all staff. LGBTQ training will be included as part of this. Also, the city conducts the Big Three: diversity, harassment, and discrimination compliance training for all staff every 3 years. Additionally, the city provides LGBTQ inclusive diversity training during new hire orientation and a more in-depth training for new supervisors once a month. There is opportunity for HR to partner with the equity team and human relations to expand diversity training to be inclusive of LGBTQ issues and to improve recruitment of individuals with diverse backgrounds. The next compliance training will be taking place in late 2020 or early 2021. For employee resource groups, the Human Relations Commission is exploring employee resource groups as an option for an inclusive workplace to include equity and LGBTQ. There's opportunity to partner with HR, who already has an employee advisory group and a subcommittee that focuses on things like benefits, career development, and compensation. For city employee domestic partner benefits, which are bonus points in the MEI index, the City of Raleigh's benefits package currently only covers legally married spouses and would need to be expanded to include domestic partnership. Currently, 2 municipalities in North Carolina received credit for domestic partner benefits. That's Carrboro and Chapel Hill. There's opportunity to look to our peer cities to learn more. For municipal service on the Human Rights Commission, Raleigh scored the full points in this section, while Wake County did not score any points. The city and county see opportunities to collaborate here. The HRC and the Office of Equity and Inclusion are looking to partner with Wake County on human relations work. This will create several opportunities to expand LGBTQ outreach. For the LGBTQ liaison in the city executive's office, to earn credit in this category, the city must have an officially designated liaison to the LGBTQ community who reports to the city manager and whose designation and contact information is posted on the city website for the public to find. We expect to receive points for this in 2020 with the joint position that Dr. Audrey Caesar holds as the Executive Director of the Human Relations Commission and Director of the new Office of Equity and Inclusion. This position is designated as the LGBTQ liaison and is part of the City Manager's office. For a city provides services to LGBTQ homeless people, the city has an established partnerships with nonprofits, healthcare providers, faith-based organizations, and businesses to provide a homeless service resource center called Oak City Cares. This is a services hub for connecting individuals and families at risk or experiencing homelessness to coordinated services that create a path to stable housing and renewed hope. Services provided are inclusive and offer residents access to stable housing while making sure their human dignity, worth, and rights are respected. Several of the Oak City Cares service providers are listed on the LGBT Center of Raleigh community resource page as organizations who express particular interest in working with the LGBTQ community. So there are opportunities to expand our reach for municipal services. As mentioned, the city and Wake County are looking to partner on strengthening LGBTQ issues. The city funds several current programs and will continue to look for partnerships to provide more direct services. For the 2020 MEI Index, we expect to receive a few additional bonus points. The approved FY21 city budget included funding for new LGBTQ-specific programs. These include the LGBT Center of Raleigh, programs for transgender initiatives, gender support groups, queer NC, LGBTQ youth leadership, safe environment for youth, youth drop-ins, ally programs, a queer young adult book club, and more. For LGBTQ homeless populations, the Haven House Wren House received city support. Wren House is an emergency shelter that provides immediate crisis intervention for at-risk youth who are unable to go home due to homelessness or other issues. This program supports youth and their families who identify with the LGBTQ community. Raleigh Planned Parenthood also received city support. Teen health services were funded which includes gender-affirming hormone therapy services for transgender patients, and the organization pays particular attention to the needs of LGBTQ youth and teens. These are a few examples of new additions, and there are other examples of City of Raleigh support for LGBTQ services. For law enforcement, all Raleigh police officers are trained and responsible for serving all communities, including the LGBTQ community. The MEI Index calls for a specific LGBTQ liaison. We did not receive points in 2019, but the City Council recently approved a new police accountability board, and an LGBTQ liaison is appointed for this board. We expect to receive points for this in future MEI indexes if they're posted and available to the public for everybody to know who they are. This board and the LGBTQ liaison will look at policies, engagement opportunities, and promotion of the LGBTQ support. And in addition, several municipalities in North Carolina have a specialized LGBTQ contact in senior leadership with the police department, including Carrboro, Chapel Hill, and Charlotte for police, and then Durham, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem. there may be opportunities to explore what other cities have done. Lastly, local community officers have long been building relationships with Raleigh's LGBTQ center leadership. The police and the chief participate and support various LGBTQ community activities. With the new LGBTQ liaison and other city equity support, this existing relationship will continue to bring opportunities for growth. For leadership on LGBTQ equality, Raleigh has been receiving points in this category of pro-equality leadership and policy efforts for several years. Leadership's pro-equality legislative or policy efforts can continue to be strengthened with the new pathways that City Council and City staff leadership have created. Openly LGBTQ elected or appointed municipal leaders. So during the 2019 Raleigh municipal election, 2 openly LGBTQ council members were elected. So I'm happy to say that we expect to receive credit in this category for the first time. City tests limits of restricted state laws. Raleigh continues to receive full points in this category and expects to continue to grow this support. So in wrapping up and thinking about what's to come as we move forward, we expect to see continued support for growth for LGBTQ issues in Raleigh. With these new pathways that City Council and City leadership have created, we will strive to improve outcomes for our LGBTQ community members, and when we improve outcomes for those most impacted, we improve the outcomes for everyone in Raleigh. So in summary, the new and existing pathways for future opportunities could include the equity teams, the new Office of Equity and Inclusion, the new LGBTQ liaison positions, the continued work of the Human Relations Commission and their many boards and commissions, the budding partnership with Wake County, the comprehensive plan, and the City of Raleigh strategic plan that your council committee is working to update today could also provide a new pathway for equity. Lastly, I just wanted to remind City Council of the recently released statement that our equity team created and the city manager shared across the organization last week. Here's the statement on the city's approach to equity, and I have a few words to address how LGBTQ issues directly relate. We know that there are disproportionate impacts to the LGBTQ community in Raleigh and across the nation and across the world, and in particularly our LGBTQ communities of color, our Black and Brown residents and visitors, experience the worst impacts of these groups. We must look to address impacts to those most affected so that we can bring everyone up together. And when we do this, this creates a better Raleigh for all of us. Everyone in Raleigh will benefit from a more just and equitable system. So as Ruffin mentioned, we will be communicating this statement and other supporting equity resources throughout the organization and using it as a part of training and learning sessions moving forward. This information will be used for supporting city staff in our work to support the community. We will also be making these resources available to the public so that the community can utilize them and keep up with what we're doing. We expect to see continued support for LGBTQ issues and to strive to improve outcomes for these communities. So with that in mind, we look forward to continuing this work, and we look forward to any questions or guidance from Council. As a reminder, I have representatives here to help me answer any questions from Human Relations Commission, the Office of Equity Inclusion, as well as the City Attorney's Office and Sustainability. So thanks for the attention and your leadership in this area.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. I know, Patrick, you're on the phone. You can speak up if you have a question. Councillor Cox.
Yes, a couple questions regarding the barriers that are created by state law. Could we add to our legislative agenda to actively lobby to have those barriers removed? That would be one question. And then another question has to do with the police liaison. I know we've discussed this in the past several years, and one of the things that we lack is a convenient web page that lists contacts and phone numbers where people can contact for situations where they're facing harassment or discrimination or perhaps abuse. And been trying for several years now to try to get that up on a city website. Haven't been successful. I was wondering if we could move forward with that this year. So those are my questions.
Robin or Dottie, I don't know if you want to address the first question, and then Marshall, I would defer to you, but happy to follow up as well.
Okay. Right now, as far as state law goes, is pretty well established, and the General Assembly is getting ready to go home in a couple of days. If that's something that the council wants to discuss for the next legislative session, I would suggest that we maybe discuss that with our lobbyist, Philip Osley.
I would also suggest that we have some specifics when we have that discussion. So in that regard, that would be helpful.
I will do it.
Thank you.
And I will take the second question, Mr. Cox, in regards to having a dedicated staff resource or police liaison. I do know that it's my understanding that the LBGTQ Center has Raleigh PD as a resource on its website. And as we look to further develop mental health units as part of some of the strategic operations of RPD moving forward, therein lies another opportunity to have a dedicated staff resource to address LGBTQ concerns.
So I guess, my question is now, is this, as it has been in the past, is that if the LGBTQ Center can have on their website contact information, why can't we have it on our website as well?
We can follow up on that.
Okay.
And there have been several conversations over that
Okay,
on that topic, but I'll follow back up with you on that one.
thank you.
Counselor Martin?
Thank y'all for this. I just have a few questions. There was a note in the presentation that said that I think I got this right. If I got it wrong, just tell me. That we got a point for the fact that our Human Relations Commission had an enforcement mechanism. Is that correct?
I would want to, yep.
Okay.
Yes, I'm getting a nod that yes.
Can you just explain for me what that enforcement mechanism is, just so I'm clear?
I'm going to ask and see if our representative from the Human Relations Commission might have a little bit more information on that. And otherwise, Marquita is here today. Let me just see 1 second.
Sure. Thank you. And if there isn't a clear answer today, an email follow-up is fine. I thought that was interesting that we would have a point for it, and I'd like to know.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the question. And she's looking it up now, but we'll follow up with you so you can have more detail. There's a lot in here, so we appreciate that. And we also got a point for the city being willing to test restrictive state law. And so to the point that Councilor Cox made, would also like to support what the mayor said and what Councilor Cox said about the attorney bringing forward specific opportunities about how we might work with our lobbyists to bring forward these items on the next legislative agenda in January of 2021, and bring that discussion forward for the rest of council to figure out how to move. Also, there was a point that we received for reporting our hate crime statistics to the FBI. I also would really be interested to see what those statistics are in Raleigh. So I think that following that up for the rest of council to see would be interesting as well. Sure.
We can do that.
Thank you. Around the Raleigh Fair Housing Board, I'm really excited to hear that we're moving forward, and I think you said that the attorney's office is doing this, so thank you, Robin, for redrafting some of the language around the Federal Fair Housing Act and the intent is trying to get that to mimic some of the language there. I heard the word was intent, and so I'm curious what the goal is in terms of how we're implementing the LGBTQ population into the current Raleigh Fair Housing ordinances, and how we're making sure that they're protected.
And Robin, I'll defer to you or Dottie, but I will mention, from what I understand, and this is coming from the Office of Human Relations as they're looking into it, that there's some preemption issues there, and so they're trying to follow HUD, and I think they're trying to look into now what HUD's language is and if it's going to be updated and what that looks like, and Robin may have some more.
It may be Nicolette from my office working. I have not been, we have a couple of memos that set out what our authority is under the Fair Housing Act. But I'll have to find out, someone needs to reach out to me about changing the wording of the actual ordinance. The research we've done in the past has to do with whether or not they can actually hear cases, and we would need a look back to do that, and have asked and been refused in the past. So to what our discussions have involved.
Okay. The last thing before my last point is that I saw that we may have the opportunity to expand domestic partnership benefits in the city, and that there are 2 other cities nearby that do that. And I think that we already have such an incredible benefits package that we offer in the city, especially around transgender health benefits, which I think is such an enormous opportunity that we should champion more often and be out front talking about. I mean, the fact that the city supports that, I think it's a 100% coverage rate for anyone that's transitioning is almost unheard of for employers. So we should be out championing that, but I also think that we should be supporting the city taking the stance of expanding domestic partnership benefits. And then in closing, I'll just say that I know that this is I'm happy to see that we're taking this on. I also know that HRC comes under fire sometimes for having only the viewpoint of white gay men as their focal point in their in their assessment of their work. And so I don't know, Mayor, the best way to do this, because I always get in trouble with bringing things into committee. So I'm just curious about the way that we can continue this and all of the great information that's come up, but also understanding that, especially to the equity statement that Ruffin put out and that you brought up at the podium, that, we do need to also look at the folks that are most vulnerable in the LGBTQ population, which are Black and brown trans, individuals in the community. And the HRC Index, I think, comes under fire a lot of times for leaving those folks out. So I'd be curious how we continue this work while also reaching to ensure that we are bringing that, that we're analyzing our best practices and our policies across the institution to make sure that those folks are being lifted up as well. So I don't want to get myself in trouble by trying to pull something into committee that isn't here yet. So I don't know if that's like asking staff to go and bring something in, or if we need to bring it in from the table at a regular meeting. But just kind of, that's something that's on my mind. But thank you so much for this presentation.
If I may, Mayor Baldwin, I would suggest, Councilmember Martin, that as we schedule the work session to look at the makeup of the HRC, that would be a prime opportunity wherein you all can consider what that membership looks like moving forward. And that could be part of designated seats, particularly as an option, as opposed to putting it in committee. It might be better served if we use that as a talking point as part of that work session around the HRC.
Sure. And by HRC, I also meant like the actual like national organization. Sorry, I didn't mean our internal like organization. I realized that could have been confusing. I wasn't criticizing us.
I got it.
But yeah.
I mean, Sage was referring to the HRC Index specifically.
Yes.
But quite frankly, Marshall, you make a really good point. That's part of the discussion I think we need to have about the Human Relations Commission. What is its role? How do we expand that role? What does that representation look like? What skill sets do we need? So a robust discussion enhance the HRC, meaning our HRC, and really embrace the whole diversity issue. So I think that's timely. I just had a couple of things. I also had noted the enhanced domestic partner benefits. I think that would be excellent. I was on the council when we initiated domestic partner benefits, and that was a major step forward. This could be an even bigger step forward and necessary. So really like that. And I just wanted to, most of what I would have said has already been said other than that. So I just wanted to ask Councilor Buffkin if he is still on the line and if he has any questions.
I'm still here, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity, but I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And I guess some of these things will follow up in the manager's report. Robin, if you could follow up with me on the state issues, we will have a discussion with our lobbyist. And I am going to make a motion to report this out of committee. I don't think we need to say, I mean, with a make the motion, report it out of committee, asking that we come back with information on state laws and potential.
Mayor,
What? Hello?
Yeah, I think Patrick just dropped from the call. I'll try to get him back on.
Okay. So I'm going to I'll start this again. Make a motion to report this out of committee with the following actions taken. Asking the city attorney to come back with a report on potential a government relations. I don't want to call it lobbying, but government relations.
Maybe legislative agenda.
Legislative agenda, or and also we have a new Supreme Court ruling. So how does that all impact this as well? So I think it's a little more complicated than that, but if you could come back with some type of report for us.
Maybe it might be good if I first outline what the state law is, what they're referring to as far as what the authority we have or don't have right now. And that would probably be a good starting point to know what the laws are before we decide about, potentially which ones we would potentially ask to change.
Okay.
Second.
You have the motion. Report out. Following action taken, asking that we get a review from the city attorney on state laws and how we might move forward with a legislative agenda.
Yes, ma'am. I believe I got it. We'll formulate it so it makes sense when it appears on the agenda on July 2nd.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Cox second that. So thank you. All in favor?
Hello?
Patrick, we just
Hello?
took a vote. Did you hear?
Mayor, I couldn't hear anything. What happened?
Okay. Report this item out, and with the following action taken, that we get a report back from the city attorney on state laws and possibly adding this to our legislative agenda. It was
Okay.
Councillor Cox. I asked all in favor. It was 3-0. So we'll ask what your vote is.
Well, I think I should be recorded voting yes,
Okay.
since I was here, but even though I wasn't present for the vote.
Okay. Well, no, we're good. If you're a yes vote, we can count 4-0. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I voted on, but I guess that'll be okay.
Patrick, I just told you we voted to send to report this out and ask that the city attorney review state laws review state laws that impact our ability to, I'm trying to give you more detail, is what I'm trying to do.
I think you want to look at our ability to regulate discrimination outside of the city, correct?
They curtail our ability to enact anti-discrimination laws against LGBT people. So we want to report, Robin, which laws are we talking about, what, blah, blah, blah. And then the next piece is, and then consider adding something to our legislation. We want to review, though, of the laws first.
Right, and we'll get some advice from our city lobbyist about whether or not to add it to our agenda for next year.
Yes, but that's not in the motion.
Okay, thank you.
That's our process. So are you, I would like clarity on your vote.
I'd like to be recorded voting yes.
Okay, then that is 4-0. Now that you know what you voted on.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Our next item is the strategic plan.
Hi, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Stephanie Olson. I'm the Strategic Planning and Performance Manager for the City of Raleigh, and I am here today to give you a very brief presentation on some background on our strategic plan, and then hear from you about your feedback on what you would like us to do moving forward. So I will get started as soon as this presentation's up. So like I said, I'm going to go over a brief background on Raleigh's strategic plan, a review of the process for revising the FY21 through 25 plan, recommendations that our Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community Core Team developed for you all to consider, and then receive some additional feedback from you all and some next steps. So a phrase that we like to use in the City of Raleigh is that our strategic plan provides a solid foundation for an intentional future. And this language really speaks to how we align our efforts and resources to help us in moving forward our identified priorities. So strategic planning allows us to take a moment away from the tactical responsibilities of operating a city organization and challenges us to think about the bigger picture. It provides us an organized process for us to do three main things. It helps us understand the vision that you as council have for our community. It helps us that once we understand that vision, we can think through how to best align the organization's efforts and actions to support the vision and make it a reality. And finally, it provides an organized process for being bold enough to evaluate our progress to know whether our actions are getting us closer to the desired outcomes and your desired vision. So when we revisit what strategic planning is and its value and why we do it, it becomes apparent that when you know where you'd like to go and there are thoughts on how you'd like to get there, it's easier to stay focused on our priorities. We can be clear and transparent to employees in the community about the direction that we're headed and what we're trying to accomplish. And finally, it's easier for us to collaborate so that we can better map out who needs to be at the table and ensure that they are in the decision process. I want to just briefly go over how we use the strategic plan throughout the city and how it's embedded in our culture. So at the corporate level, we have the strategic plan, which is developed and adopted by City Council. We also have business plans that the departments and offices develop, and those are required to tie into the strategic plan. And then finally, individual employees have their work plans and goals, and those all align and tie back to the strategic plan. So really this vision helps inform the work that we're doing throughout the city. A little bit of background on our current strategic plan. So the plan runs from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 20. So it is time for a revised plan from you all. And this plan was adopted in April of 2015. It has 6 key focus areas that were developed and adopted by council. The two that the one that I'm going to talk about right now is Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community. And each key focus area includes objectives, initiatives, and measures. And I'll go into a little bit more about those objectives and initiatives in a moment. And then Yearly, you all go through the plan. This usually happens at your council retreat, and you receive some recommended actions from staff on things that you can update in the plan to keep it kind of alive and relevant as we move forward. So just briefly, what are we talking about when we talk about an objective and an initiative? So an objective is a strategic goal that indicates new results or conditions that you would like to see as a council. And then an initiative takes it one step further and is an action statement that helps outline strategies and actions that will help us achieve our objectives. So just briefly, an example from the current strategic plan, we have Objective 2, which is preserve and increase the supply of housing for all income groups, including those with supportive service needs. And Initiative 2.4 falls under that objective, and it is to pursue affordable housing goals as outlined in the Affordable Housing Improvement Plan and approved by City Council. So you can see that initiative is more of an action statement, and the objective is what goal we're trying to reach with all the initiatives. There are several ways that we communicate our progress throughout the year. So we have semi-annual City of Raleigh statistics, which we call them core stat meetings. This is where we have groups of employees who are assigned to each of the initiatives that you identify, and they are helping to shepherd along the progress on those initiatives, and they will report to city management at these meetings to make sure that they're still in line with council's vision. We also have our annual year-end performance report, which is where we report out those results to you all and to the community. So the most recent one, you can see a picture there, is fiscal year 2019. We have progress updates, like I mentioned, at City Council retreats, where you also go through a yearly and do some small updates to the plan. We have occasionally initiative spotlights at council meetings. So those are some of the videos that you see, and we try to be clear that it's an initiative that is tied into our strategic plan. And then finally, we do regularly update the strategic planning website, and you'll see updates on there as soon as we receive our semi-annual updates from our initiative teams and our performance measure teams at the end of July. So now that the fiscal year 16 through 20 strategic plan is wrapping up, it's time to revise that plan, and so that's where you all come in. And so I just wanted to really briefly share what we've done so far to help you in this process. We shared an overview at City Council retreat and received some initial feedback, so I'll share that feedback back out with you all just to see if that is still in line with where you would like us to go, because I know that was quite a while ago. And then core teams who are made up of cross-departmental leaders, typically our department directors and our assistant directors, work to develop some cleanup recommendations for council consideration. So these are really in line with what you typically see each year at your council retreat. It includes some initiatives that we feel like have been completed and some technical language changes. So before I dive into that, I just wanted to recognize the Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community Core Team. This is a group that helps to shepherd along this particular key focus area, and it helps our initiative teams to make sure that they're staying in line with your vision. So a couple of recommendations that they had, and I will say these are outlined in greater detail in the memo that was attached, but wanted to briefly highlight them here. So there are a couple of initiatives that we feel the intent has been met and would like to mark as complete. Initiative 1.1 speaks to developing a comprehensive approach for assessing city resources that are needed to ensure an adequate staff presence at entertainment venues and special events. This group helped to work together to bring the portable barriers to Raleigh that are used during special events to enhance pedestrian safety. And I'll say that those barriers also help us achieve some goals in different key focus areas, for example, helping with our environmental work. And then we also had created a special events task force that helps to move this initiative along on a regular basis. And so we feel like the intent of this initiative has been met. Initiative 1.3 is to evaluate public safety staffing and facility needs in order to optimize public safety outcomes. Fire and police staffing studies were completed, and facility needs are monitored and reviewed on an ongoing basis. So they felt like the intent behind this particular initiative, as it reads right now, was met. Initiative 2.1 speaks to establishing partnerships to provide for a homeless service resource center. You heard Megan earlier mention the Oak City Care Center, so that was a partnership with the city, and we continue to provide them with support as they provide services to individuals in Raleigh who are facing homelessness or are at risk of facing homelessness. And then finally, Initiative 2.2 speaks about expanding partnerships to increase the supply of permanent housing for formerly homeless and at-risk persons with special needs. This particular initiative, the city has developed and maintained strong partnerships that enhance the supply of permanent and affordable housing, and so we feel this has been operationalized, and by that I mean it's become a part of our regular operations as a city.
Can I just...
Then the final recommendations come in the form of several initiatives where they're not necessarily marked complete, but there are some technical language changes that the committee is recommending. I just wanted to really quick highlight what those are. Those tend to be synthesizing some existing languages to make it a little bit more simple, enhancing inclusivity of language, recognizing the importance of transit and other amenities for communities, and then finally aligning with the current status of projects.
Could we go back to the previous slide on Oak City Cares and
Yes.
expanding partnerships? You know, I think this sends a wrong message because I don't think this initiative is complete. I think it's a work in progress. We did supply funding for Oak City Cares. More to do. It's like we started this with the county and now it's like, okay, we did it. But there's so much more that needs to be done. And I think that we need to, I'm really uncomfortable saying this is complete. I think it's a work in progress. So I just wanted to make that point.
Certainly, yes, and we can work with you all to perhaps adjust the language to better represent the stage that we're at and make sure that we're striving for the goals that you all have as a council.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to you all and just see if you had any questions or concerns about the proposed revisions. I wrote down the one from the mayor, so we'll be sure to go back and revisit that one. But if council agrees with the proposed changes, we would recommend directing staff to incorporate those into the draft revision. And right after this, just so you know, we'll move into some of the feedback that you all had from the council retreat and get into some kind of deeper and broader changes. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all to see if there's any questions.
Okay, Councilor Cox.
Yeah, I think I would like to hold off on voting on this until we hear further about other changes to the strategic plan. I really do think that we need to think more holistically about this strategic plan, what our strategy is, particularly regarding safety. Obviously, we need to think more about the future of policing and what our strategic plan is regarding policing. And I think we need to think more about the pandemic and health in general, and what our strategic plan is, because I don't think the pandemic's going to end within the next few weeks. It's going to be going on for some time, and there could very well be future pandemics and I think we need to develop some strategy around those things. So, so my recommendation is that we hold off on voting on some of these things until we have a more complete discussion.
Well, do you have additional information you're presenting today, Stephanie?
Yes.
Okay. So let's continue to go through that first, because if you look at the back, like the PowerPoint that we got in our backup, coming. Mm-hmm. So let's get through this before, yeah. Okay.
Sounds good. Do you mind pulling back up? Okay, so we received some initial feedback from you all at your council retreat. We also recognize that this was a while ago and there may be other priorities that have risen to the surface, but wanted to bring these back for you all just as a refresher and to see if they're still in line with the types of things that you'd like to see in the strategic plan. So briefly, I'll go through these. One piece of feedback was that you'd like us to reference affordable housing and the key focus area goal statement. So under each of the key focus areas, there's a statement that speaks broadly to what all is included in that key focus area. You would also like us to look at options to address housing conditions for children, revisit the affordable housing plan and the affordable housing location policy and update those. Consider the unique needs of populations for housing planning purposes. Explore options for addressing homelessness in the city. Educate and incentivize more landlords to accept housing vouchers throughout the city and understand the benefits of accepting those. Recognizing the importance of connectivity in neighborhoods as we're making choices about where to locate affordable housing and how to connect our neighborhoods. Exploring the city's role in addressing gentrification, reviewing city code enforcement policy to understand its impact, considering the city's role in gun violence prevention, and implementation of the Police Advisory Board and highlighting that in the strategic plan. And then finally, there was a couple of staff-identified trends and opportunities that the assistant city managers presented to you all during your retreat, and just wanted to highlight those again here just in case you would like those included. Real and perceived safety in the community, our housing stock availability, and concerns around meeting the demands of a growing community, and then finally the upcoming affordable housing bond. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you. We wanted to hear from you if these topics still align with the priorities that you have in Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community, and are there any additional priorities that you would like to see in the strategic plan?
Comments or questions?
Other than the ones that I already mentioned, I don't have anything additional.
Councilor Martin?
I agree with Councilor Cox. I think that I'm glad that we're reviewing this again because it feels like a life ago that we did this work and had these conversations. Yeah. So I think that it's helpful to be reminded about our goals and intentions just a few months ago and to understand what the baseline was then. And to, I think for us to continue the conversations as a committee and then as a council moving forward about what our, what the goal of this committee is and kind of what our strategic plan is for it. So.
Councilor Buffkin?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the strategic plan still reflects a lot of what I believe are the council's goals for the near future, particularly the focus on housing, homelessness, and issues around that implementation of the Police Advisory Board. Obviously, that's underway. So I think it's still very reflective, notwithstanding the fact that a lot's changed since February or January, whenever we had our retreat.
Okay. I have a couple of things. First off, I want to make sure that that were contained in the committee recommendations for the affordable housing bond are reflected in these goals to ensure that they are captured at a high level. There's a lot of focus on, 30% AMI, also the first time home program, home repair program, the ability to, with land purchases and public-private partnerships. I think it needs to be elevated in our strategic plan. And the second thing is, I think that we need to move forward with this piece of it. This really reflects the housing piece. There's more work that we will be doing. One of the on safety and police issues. One of the reasons why when we came back and created this committee, I asked that it go back to safe, healthy, and vibrant, because we had no committee addressing police issues or public safety issues. And as the former chair of the Law and Public Safety Committee, I thought it was important that we have that type of review. The last council changed that, but bringing this back and being able to have these conversations, I think will be really helpful in the future. And as you know, cannot refer items to this committee at committee. That has to be done through the whole council. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the strategic plan with the proposed changes that were suggested, and report this out of committee. With approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Councilor Martin and Councilor Cox, you don't want to move this out of committee. All right, can you tell me why?
I'll just reiterate what I've already said. I just think there's additional work that needs to be done. And I think it would be best to keep it in committee where we can continue to work on it. We can invite the public to come and talk about the strategic plan, particularly as it relates to issues such as policing. And we can hear more from our other council members, but I think it's important to keep it in committee so we can actually do the work.
And yeah, I would agree. I think that the housing perhaps could move, but even that, I think there are some changes, but given just COVID in general, and some language changes that I'd like to see, but agree that we need to uplift specifically some work around the bond that should be added in. But I think specifically around policing, I mean, the environment that we're in currently is not anywhere near what we were in February. And so to move this forward seems, well, I understand, the intent was clear and was right about why we renamed it and moved forward with the strategy that we did. It also, approving the current strategy would leave out the moment that we're in. And I think that the strategy needs to be reflective of the fact that fundamentally things have completely altered and changed. And so I don't think that will take a ton of time, but I think that we may need to have another meeting or two in July to do as Councilor Cox said, and to hear from folks in the community.
So Stephanie, just to help the conversation some, will you speak to what next steps will be in the process and the evolution of the next stage of the strategic plan?
Sure. So we are happy to take the feedback that we heard from you all today and draft up some draft language that you can respond to make sure that it's in line with the intention that you had when you were sharing those topics. And then we can bring that back to you all for your review and approval whenever you would like that to come back to you. So we'll work with staff to make sure that we update the language accordingly, and then you can respond and kind of dig in a little bit deeper as needed.
Yes, and if you could envision how we would be able to involve community members in this discussion, that would be helpful as well.
Okay.
So I do have a question. This is our strategic plan. This is what we were asked to work on. It's this current plan. Do we need a referral back to this committee to address police issues from the full council? And I guess I'm asking the city attorney, or I don't know who I'm asking.
I don't know that there's any rules on it, but it might be a good idea to check back in since it's new and everything has come up again. But I don't necessarily think it's required. But if you went back to council and said you want to put that on your agenda, that way you'd be clear.
And Mayor, if you so choose, we could also just bring this new language forward as part of the rewrite of the plan, because this really is capping off the approved plan or the 5-year plan that we previously had. And so this language would inform and influence what the next stage of the strategic plan might look like. So that's another option if you didn't want to take it back to council, as these could be ideas and recommendations that come from the committee as part of the revised and new language for the new strategic plan.
Certainly, council could review that language and make changes to what we do in committee.
Sure.
I just don't want to get in violation of the rules that we have, which are you can't refer new items to yourself. They have to be referred to committee by the full council. And
I don't think we're referring new items. I think we're just really diving into the details of what we were charged to do, which was to look at the strategic plan.
okay, so I had suggested that we move this out of committee and then ask the council to come back, like to make a motion to give us authority to come back and look at some of the policing issues and other items. And I guess that's not good enough.
Well, I prefer to take the approach of leaving it in committee so that we can just continue to have further discussions about this.
Okay, well, it was a 2-2 vote. And the clerk has that noted. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, I am going to make a motion to it. Well, no, we are adjourned.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.